For 45 years, the Pine Valley mine disaster remained a closed case. Natural gas explosion, nothing more. Then Detective Sebastian Locke received an unmarked envelope containing a faded photograph of 22 miners on their last day alive, with a handwritten note on the back. Ask why Jimmy Morrison had to die. But when Sebastian checked the official victim list, Jimmy Morrison's name wasn't there. Officially, only 21 men had died in the explosion. Sebastian studied the photograph under his desk lamp. Jimmy Morrison stood in the center, addressing his fellow workers with obvious urgency. His expression was serious, determined. The postmark was local, dated just 3 days ago. Someone in Pine Valley still remembered the truth about October 12, 1978. But what Sebastian would discover about that photograph would expose a conspiracy that reached all the way to corporate boardrooms in Denver. The drive to Pine Valley took Sebastian through mountains scarred by decades of mining. The town seemed frozen in 1978, its main street lined with empty storefronts and faded signs. Mrs. Eleanor Hart, the former newspaper editor, maintained the Herald archives in the old library basement. At 73, she remembered the disaster like it was yesterday. 22 good men, she said, leading Sebastian through yellowed newspapers. The explosion happened during night shift, around 2:15 a.m. Gas pocket ignited, they said. Sebastian examined the October 13th front page, Mining Disaster Kills 22. The article described a tragic industrial accident. Natural gas accumulation, poor ventilation, inevitable tragedy. Tell me about Jimmy Morrison, Sebastian said. Mrs. Hartwell's expression darkened. Jimmy wasn't supposed to be working that night. He switched shifts with Pete Kowalski at the last minute. Pete's wife was in labor. That's not in the report. No. Neither are the death threats Jimmy received. She led him to a filing cabinet and pulled out a manila folder marked Personnel. Inside were photocopied documents that had never made it to print. Jimmy had been organizing the miners, better safety equipment, higher wages. The mine company wasn't happy. The folder contained 3 death threats, escalating in violence over 2 weeks. The final one, dated 2 days before the explosion. 24 hours to back down, or your family joins you. Jimmy took these to Sheriff Brennan, Mrs. Hartwell explained. The sheriff said they were pranks, told him not to worry. Sheriff Brennan, still alive, died in 1985. Car accident. She paused meaningfully, right after he bought that expensive new house on a sheriff's salary. Sebastian made a mental note. 2 convenient deaths, both men who could have exposed the truth. The pattern was becoming clear. Someone had been systematically eliminating witnesses, but what she showed Sebastian next would prove this was no industrial accident. Hidden in Jimmy Morrison's file was a carbon copy of a letter to the Environmental Protection Agency, dated October 10th. 2 days before his death. Jimmy hadn't just found safety violations. He'd discovered the mine was illegally dumping toxic waste into Pine Valley's water supply, chemical runoff that was poisoning the entire town. If this letter had reached federal investigators, ... double quotes, Sebastian began, it would have meant criminal charges for the executives. Mrs. Hartwell finished. Prison time, not just fines. The EPA letter changed everything. This wasn't about union organizing anymore. It was about covering up environmental crimes that could destroy lives and careers. At the Pine Valley Municipal Building, Sebastian met David Chun, whose grandfather Pete Kowalski had been scheduled to work the fatal night shift. My grandfather kept a notebook, Chun said nervously, about strange things he noticed before the explosion. The notebook documented suspicious activity. Unfamiliar men asking about shift schedules, equipment deliveries that didn't match mining supplies, cars with Denver plates parked around town. 2 days before the explosion, a corporate executive visited the mine, Chun explained. My grandfather heard him asking specifically about Jimmy Morrison's schedule. They were targeting Jimmy specifically. Chun nodded, but when Jimmy switched shifts, they went ahead with their plan anyway. 21 innocent men died as collateral damage. What Sebastian discovered next would lead him directly to the killers. Denver's Colorado State Archives held Consolidated Rocky Mountain Mining's corporate records. The company had been facing bankruptcy in 1978, until a massive insurance payout from the mine explosion saved them. The original insurance investigator, Robert Hayes, was still alive in Colorado Springs. When Sebastian called, Hayes' voice became tense. "I've been waiting 45 years for someone to ask the right questions," Hayes said. "Meet me at the Highway 24 diner." Midnight. The elderly investigator was shaking as he poured sugar into his coffee. "They threatened my career. Made it clear my report would determine whether I kept working." "What did you really find?" Hayes pulled out an envelope he'd hidden for decades. "Explosive residue analysis showing commercial dynamite, not natural gas ignition. The blast pattern was wrong for an accidental explosion. The evidence was damning. Multiple blast points throughout the tunnel, timed to detonate simultaneously. Someone had planted enough explosives to bring down the entire section. But here's what bothers me," Hayes continued. "The explosive placement was amateur. Too much power. Poorly calculated. It was supposed to be a smaller, localized explosion. Just enough to kill Morrison, and maybe one or two others. A targeted assassination disguised as a workplace accident." "Exactly, but the engineering was botched. Instead of a small cavern, they brought down the whole tunnel. 21 innocent men became collateral damage in a corporate hit job." Hayes leaned forward. The man who ordered it was Richard Blackwood, Consolidated's VP. "He's dead now, but his assistant, Marcus Thornfield, is still alive in Denver." Sebastian knew his next stop. The trail led directly to the man who had helped plan Jimmy Morrison's assassination. Marcus Thornfield lived in Denver's most expensive suburb, his wealth apparently intact, despite his company's eventual collapse. At 81, he was still sharp, still arrogant. Sebastian arrived unannounced, carrying his evidence and decades of determination. "Mr. Thornfield, I'm Detective Sebastian Locke. We need to discuss Jimmy Morrison's murder." The old man's face remained composed. "That was an industrial accident, ruled as such officially. 22 men died because Jimmy Morrison discovered your illegal waste dumping." Sebastian spread photos across the coffee table. "You killed him to prevent EPA prosecution." Thornfield studied the evidence. The EPA letter, the explosive analysis, witness statements about the suspicious corporate visit. "You have no proof connecting me to anything illegal." Sebastian pulled out his phone. "Actually, I do." He played a scratchy recording. A phone conversation between Richard Blackwood and someone called Marcus. "Morrison's getting too close to the waste site. Needs to be handled permanently. God, make it look industrial. Small explosion during his shift should do it." Thornfield's face went gray. "Where did you get that?" Jimmy Morrison was more paranoid than you realized. He'd been recording company phone calls for weeks, building his federal case. The tape was in his safety deposit box. The old man slumped forward, the weight of decades crushing him. "We never meant for all those men to die. It was supposed to be a small, localized blast. Just Morrison's section of tunnel. But your people screwed up the engineering. The explosives were more powerful than calculated. The tunnel collapse spread beyond the target zone. We killed 21 innocent men by mistake. You still chose to murder Jimmy Morrison." Thornfield's voice became barely a whisper. He was going to destroy everything. Federal charges, prison sentences, the end of the company. We had no choice. Sebastian reached into his briefcase and removed a digital recorder that had been running throughout the conversation. "Mr. Thornfield, you just confessed to conspiracy to commit murder, and I recorded every word." The truth about Pine Valley was finally coming to light. Marcus Thornfield's confession reopened the Pine Valley case as a federal investigation, while the statute of limitations prevented prosecution for the 1978 murders. Thornfield faced federal conspiracy charges and insurance fraud that would ensure he died in prison. The FBI investigation revealed the full scope of the Richard Blackwood had ordered a targeted assassination to prevent environmental crime prosecution. The plan had been botched by amateur explosives work, turning a single murder into mass killing. The families finally learned the truth. Their loved ones hadn't died in an industrial accident. They were collateral damage in a corporate assassination. Months later, Sebastian returned to the sealed mine entrance. A new memorial recognized Jimmy Morrison as a whistleblower who died trying to protect both his fellow workers and his community from environmental poisoning. David Chun was there with other family members who had waited 45 years for answers. "My grandfather saved Jimmy's shift notes," Chun said, handing Sebastian a faded notebook. Jimmy wrote down everything about the waste dumping, right up until the day he died. He knew someone was trying to silence him. Sebastian opened the notebook to Jimmy's final entry, dated the day before his death. "If something happens to me, make sure the truth comes out. The company is poisoning our water with mercury and lead compounds. I have samples hidden in my basement workshop. They'll kill to keep this quiet, but the evidence will survive." Sebastian looked up at David Chun. "Did anyone ever search Jimmy's house after the explosion?" "The basement was flooded the next week," Chun replied. "Broken water main. Everything down there was destroyed. Tools, papers, everything Jimmy had collected. Another convenient accident." Sebastian realized the cover-up had been thorough, systematic. But Jimmy's words had survived 45 years, and that was enough. Standing in the mountain's silence, Sebastian looked at the photograph that had started everything. Jimmy Morrison addressing his fellow miners on their last day alive. Now he knew what Jimmy had been telling them. Someone was planning to kill him, but the truth would outlast them all. The wind carried away 45 years of lies. "Some secrets refuse to stay buried," Sebastian Locke said to the mountain air, and Pine Valley finally spoke the truth.